Portsmouth announced the signing of young striker Thomas Waddingham from Brisbane Roar. But what does he bring to the table, and what kind of centre forward is he? And I'll tell you exactly why Tommy Waddingham embodies chaos. As with all young players, his skill set is a real mixed bag of some standout attributes with some gaps in his game that really need working on. But as always, let's start with the positives because why would you start on the negative? That's fun for no one. His finishing is really consistent, quite fantastic actually, and the consistency is the key point, as can be seen here. See, clean edit. This is complemented by a brilliant composure in front of goal and a great ability to kind of to create separation, inside the box by rolling his man with his back to them and then getting shots off. Although it is important to note that although he's good at kind of getting the initial separation, rolling and getting the shot away, I found his shooting technique to be quite inconsistent and not the best when he did roll defenders. It kind of tended to kind of get over the ball a bit too much, kind of hit the. So if you, I've not got a ball near me, kind of hitting on the top of the ball rather than getting underneath it and generating power. So it kind of just either skidded along or lack that kind of power that you'd want. And as for another positives, as you might have seen in some social media clips that I would have posted or other fans would have posted or some Australians would have posted, let's say, his USP is very much his runs beyond the last line, beyond the back line. And I've not seen many strikers that are this kind of obsessed with running off the back line and stretching play vertically. But in fairness, this isn't without a reason or it isn't justified because he more than backs it up with kind of fantastic running power and an ability to stretch play vertically. And he gets quite a few goals off the back of it. So can we, moan about it too much that he's quite one-dimensional? No, maybe not. Now, in terms of areas he can develop, his biggest issue is his movement inside the box. And although he does attack the near post kind of semi-regularly, which is really nice, kind of my favourite type of movement is when you kind of go from mid to front post, which is, it's close to the ball, which is what you always want to do. And he's pretty alert to chances and kind of picks up scrappy little ones in the 6-yard box. I found his movement generally to be really static inside the box, especially when teams defending a low block. He's not the type of number 9 who can manipulate space in tight areas really well. It's not his game. He kind of more of a big space player, as we spoke about with the Hayden Matthews video. However, this is an area I feel like he can develop, especially under the guidance of Zesh Raymond, who quite a few Pompey players, especially young ones, but also smaller ones, have credited with kind of improving their attacking output and their movement and yada, yada, yada. So very much attainable for him, I feel. I did also notice that he kind of lacks that kind of set piece threat, which is more to do with his physical profile more than anything else, which we'll get to later. But there were a few occasions where kind of not even the second phase as such, a second action of the set piece. So he's not the kind of player who's going to attack the ball from the initial cross and score headers off that point. But as I said earlier, he's alert to danger inside the box, so he can kind of get his toe on things. A bit like Conor Ogilvy's goal the other day against Stoke in the second half. And finally, I found as we said earlier, I found his attacking patterns to be kind of pretty limited. He's so obsessed with running off the last line, which does work, sure. But although there are some moments where he does kind of drop off the last line and to link, he is very much what we call a low touch player, which I actually feel like he can improve to some extent because there are times where he does it and does it relatively well. Although his first touch can get kind of stuck under his feet, which is slightly annoying. I don't think he'll ever be a Colby Bishop type where he's constantly just ball to feet, ball to chest, can take 5, 6 touches, whatever. That's not his game. And that's fine. It's not every striker's built for that, but it is something he can improve on, especially if you want to kind of 2 years time, whether he can when Cole Bishop's hitting his 30s, 2-3 years time, maybe that's something he needs to look to improve to, which also allow him to raise his ceiling because you can't be like a kind of a super dimensional runner, which he knows, but he's still young, so something to keep an eye on. I would also like to see him develop his right foot because he's got an absolute cannon of a left foot, but he hardly ever really uses his right unless it's for tap-ins. Again, these things, small adjustments to kind of make yourself less one-dimensional will raise your ceiling and ultimately make you a better goal scorer and a better striker for Portsmouth. Against the ball, there is a lot to like with Tommy. He's a very willing runner and presser of the ball. He isn't afraid to follow through his pressing burst either with kind of tackles and bouts of physicality. Or the bouts of physicality aren't always most effective, but it is nice to see that kind of enthusiasm On top of this, he gets back into shape pretty well. He's not the type of number 9 who, as soon as the ball goes past him, go, oh, and then just kind of walk back or kind of mope around or just kind of wait for the ball to come back to him. He's going to get back into shape pretty quickly, which is a really good quality from a young player because you don't always see it. I guess you see it more so with players who come out of academy football. But Tommy obviously was brought up. He's played not a lot, but he's played a good amount of A-League football, senior football at a young age, which kind of aids his football education. And on top of this, he's got pretty good stamina and physical capacity to run. So he's not the type who can kind of do it for 20, 30 minutes and then go, oh, well, I'm pooped now, I'm done. Although this will obviously have to improve somewhat because naturally the Championship is of a much higher level of intensity than the A-League. So, you might be doing a similar amount of running, but you've got to run harder and faster, which, is something he will know. And again, he's young. It's very important to note, Tommy's not a complete player. Yeah, he's 19. So don't expect him to kind of be the finished article. He will have rough patches and he'll have issues and gaps, and these things can develop. And a lot of his traits that are kind of not negative, but need developing are developable. It's not a word, but I'm going to make it one. Now, in terms of those developable areas, I only really noticed 2 standout weaknesses with Tommy's defensive work. Actually, no, that's a lie. I only noticed 1. And before I say what it is, at Fratton Park the other day, I think it was half-time at Stoke game, I was chatting to someone about Tommy, and I said he worked really hard, and they went to me, so a bit of a headless chicken, is he? I wouldn't say that. I'd say he's kind of like a chicken with below average spatial awareness. I noticed quite a lot that although the intensity of his press is pretty good, and he recognised the correct triggers when to press, this was mainly backwards passes and passes kind of across the back line he kind of launched on. His issue was he struggled to cover the defensive midfielder with his shadow, which was kind of exploited by 2 main patterns. And what I mean by shadow, if you look at Tommy here, this one in red, the blue's on the ball here. When you're pressing, you're not only pressing the man. If you look at these 2 lines, you've got a kind of a shadow behind you, and you can essentially mark 2 players at once. And what Tommy often did was he didn't check his shoulders enough, which was exploited by 2 main patterns. Often, the defensive midfielder would drop into the back line, which Tommy would switch off, or switch off to the man on the ball, and he'd jog slightly, and that defender would carry out with the ball. Or what happened is he'd drop into the back line here, and then the other 6 would come over into his behind, and then you've got a 3v1. This is something that you see quite a few young forwards do, but what's really promising is that because he's got such an intensity and willingness to press and to run, I think this is something that you'll see him pick up pretty quickly. It's not a chronic issue for him. It's just kind of that lack of, use of playing at a higher intensity level. You can kind of get away with it a little bit in the lower intensity leagues. You won't be able to get away with it so much in the Championship, but I feel like it's something that will be kind of built into him by the summer. In my opinion, it's a leap that he can pretty easily make. Physically, he's a bit of a mixed bag, but at 19, there is a lot to work with and use to our advantage. As I said earlier, his running power is freakishly good over large distances. This is complemented by a great level of agility to kind of turn and spin, and back this up with a good level of balance, which allows him to kind of ride contact and create separation for shots and for passing, whatever. And on top of this, he's not actually afraid to engage physically with defenders and battle whilst pinning them. I really like that eagerness to compete. It's a really good trait to have. There are only 2 real notable, obviously there are multiple weaknesses, but the 2 notable weaknesses for Wadders that I noticed were, the biggest one being his lack of aerial ability. He's 6 foot, so he's not small, but he really just lacks much of a leap from what I've seen, and he isn't someone who's going to constantly want to attack the ball, regardless of height and size and the size of his opponent, whatever. It's quite frustrating, but I feel like it's something that we'll work on. I forgot to say it in my Hayden Matthews video, but I always look at players and I always think you are kind of molded by your environment. People are molded by their environment, but footballers are absolutely molded by their environment. And I feel like with Hayden and with Thomas, their level is here because that's where the level of intensity in the A-League is. They've not had to kind of surpass that and bring it up to here. But I feel like they're characters that will match that level. And when the going gets tough, I think they'll step up and kind of add that bit of intensity and willingness to compete. Anyway, if he wants to, well, if you should want to add that, but when he does add that, it will help both him and the team because for him, he can score more goals with his head, but also for us, it can facilitate build up. You look at Colby Bishop, I know Colby is a ridiculously high standard to want to match, but just watch Colby Bishop, the way the little flicks off his head, the chest, that's the level he should be willing to work towards. And I feel like Colby's a really good person to learn off as well, not just because Colby was a teacher before he went full time in football, but he seems like a really good kind of person who's willing to give knowledge to younger players. So that should be exciting for someone. It should be a good opportunity for him. And finally, although I wouldn't call him weak by any means, he's not. He's not the type of forward who's going to really worry centre halves about his strength. And he can compete and he can battle. But he's not the type that can really dominate yet. Maybe he can. Maybe he can put on a bit more muscle and use his body a bit cleverer. But yeah, we'll see. That's more of a longer term development for him. Now, in terms of where he fits for us, I'll give you two lineups. I'll give you a conventional, some would say boring. I'll give you a conventional one, and then a more of an experimental one, because who doesn't like to experiment? Now, as for the conventional one, it will be at Mousinho's 4-2-3-1 with Nicholas Schmidt in goal, back four, Swanson, Paul, Matthews, Ogilvie, two in midfield, Marlon Pack with Freddie Potts, three behind the striker, Richie, Lang, and Murphy. Up top, obviously, our boy, Tommy Waddingham. The idea of this being we want as many players in that back line who can play a long ball. So Swanson can, Paul can, Pack can from midfield, Potts can chip him over, Richie can. And then you've got runners in there like Lang and Murphy to complement Waddingham. I feel like this could absolutely work. And it's the idea for Tommy for now. Obviously, long term, you'd want to see him more involved in build up. For now, he's very much a last line striker who's going to run off and he's going to stretch. So why not put that to his advantage and kind of pack out that team with players who can play long balls and are going to run with him. Now, as for the more experimental one, it's a 3-4-3. That's not the experiment, don't worry. It'll get weirder than that. And Nicholas Schmidt in goal, back three, Hayden Matthews, right centre back, Kinson central centre back, Shaughnessy left centre back, although Farrell can also do that as well. Right wing back Swanson, left wing back Murphy, who can do it, I believe. Midfield two, Potts and Hayden. Number 10s, Callum Lang on the right, and something I think we'll see longer term, like a couple of years down the line, Colby Bishop as the left number 10. You get the best out Bishop dropping deep and linking play and hitting 6-yard box. But it means you can also put in Thomas Waddingham as a number 9 to stretch and create space for Colby. I feel like this is something we could see long term. It's not something we'll see immediately, but we saw last season Mousinho was willing to try Ksini Yengi and Colby Bishop as a strike partnership. Bishop naturally wants to drop deep anyway. He can operate off the last line, sure, but why not have the best of both worlds? I think that's something I would like to see and potentially be a fun experiment a little bit further down the line. Now, as we've discussed, Tommy Waddingham is many things, but the main one is raw. He's an absolute animal of a last line striker who's obsessed with taking advantage of transitional moments and attacking with space beyond the back line. He struggles when attacking versus a low block and kind of manipulating space in those tight areas with crafty box movement. But at 19, for me, it's something he can absolutely develop. He's probably a lower to mid-table League One centre forward right now, which, you might go, oh, I don't like the sound of that. But I feel like he can affect the first team with the attributes he brings. But he has potential for me to be an upper championship level forward who thrives on transitional moments and direct attacks. And that is exactly why Thomas Waddingham embodies chaos.